if you want to.
There he is.
Well,
There he is.
I was going to say it's our 7:01 yet. Still, yeah.
What are you blaming it on?
Michael said it was 13 till. Got in the car.
Power outage last week.
It doesn't go well. But I think it does.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious. I think
That's your pleasure. Okay, call the meeting to order. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear Heavenly Father, be with us this evening as we do the business for the city and the community and the good and the welfare. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
All right, this is going to be item C, approval of the agenda. So this is the approved agenda for today, June 13th, 2022, regular planning commission meeting.
I make a motion we approve the agenda.
Yeah, second?
I'll second. Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Very good. So this is item D, citizens' comments. So at this point, we will allow citizens to comment on anything that they feel they would like to comment on. They're allowed 3 minutes. You must state your first and last name and where you reside. And at this point, Mr. Chair, if you want, you can open citizens' comments.
Open citizen comments at this point.
Hello, I'm Rolf Anderson. I live at 300 North 179.
Sorry to go over fast. First, last name, and your address, please.
Okay,
Thank
Rolf
you.
Anderson. Live at 300 North 179th Court West, middle of the development. I just want to express my concern about changing the, sorry, I don't even know the terms, changing from a single family to dual family zoning. I'm concerned about the value of the property in that development I live in now, along the border property line. I'm also concerned about traffic in the area. Maple's loading up pretty heavily. I'm also concerned about schools and whether we can support the number of families that come in with all that, the way the schools are loading up. So I'd just like to let it know I'm mainly concerned about dual family. I understand the need to build more houses. I think single family, the way it is, makes sense, but I'm not too supportive of dual. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I did make it in for the harvest field. My name is Darrell Fisher. I live at 230 North, 179th Street. Court, West, just an air condition. I've worked at Spirit for quite a while, 31 years. I'm professional geologist for the state of Kansas also. So I'm 102, number 102. So water's going to be an issue in that area because my well ain't worth a darn. It's in the Wellington Formation. You guys probably have to get your water from somewhere over by, I'm going to guess over by Auburn Hills in order to get decent water around here. But the water there is bad. Most people test the water. You can't really drink the water there, so it's going to be Goddard water that you're going to put it on, or city water. And me and my wife, we oppose the dual family dwelling. We'd like to see it stay single. We understand the concerns about having additional housing in the area. We'd like to keep it single family, at least along existing property, because it's going to hurt our property values. At the same time, is there any way we can at least keep our natural barriers of our trees? You know, our houses in the egg addition run probably between $400,000 and $800,000. We're on 5 acres, and now we're going to have a housing next to it with what, 240, 230? Is that?
Just stick to the comments for now. We'll get into the agenda later.
So, you know, and it's gonna hurt our values, at least within the right next door to us. I mean, at least stay further away from the existing housing. would be our preference anyhow. We understand you gotta have more housing. And we're okay as long as there's kind of some limitations back on things. We understand that. We like to keep our trees, our tree belt, which butts up against this property. And it's a natural barrier. That's one natural barrier we do have. And we'd like to keep that, and we'd like to have the property right next to us be another natural barrier instead of putting a wall or something like that up. We just seem to have it nice and even. We moved out here in 2011. It was a rural area, beautiful area. You know, hopefully bringing in more people. Our kids all went to Eisenhower School. Very nice school. Thanks for everybody for putting up a new school. We like Eisenhower School. It's a great school. So the kids. We'd like to keep that way and keep the property value as high as we can with additional people coming in, single family versus rental. I've yet to see somebody wake up in the morning and say, I want to own a duplex. I want to rent a duplex. They want single family. That's what they'd like to do, but it's kind of hard. We understand that today's times are tough. I do have a little quick together on it. We're right next to it.
Yeah, 1 minute, Mr. Fisher.
Okay. Duplexes are going to hurt us. We can keep single family in there, would be great. We'd like to keep the standards for Eisenhower as high as we can, and Goddard at the same time. We'd like to increase that as much as we can. We'd like to keep the wildlife as much as we can in the rural area. And we know traffic's going to be a problem. And at least within the existing property line, between 200 and 400 feet away from the existing properties, structures, we'd like to keep it single family if we can. Now let's see, traffic is a problem. There's 300 units probably in there if you do it all, but surely we're going to go not at least some single family in there. I hope. I don't know. And raise. We'd like to raise the standards for Goddard if we can with our new school. Are we getting a new football field? I think we are. Anyhow, hopefully we can keep raising the standards for Goddard. That's what we want to do. Is a single family. We don't want to see the high turnover rate of the rental properties. We'd sooner have single home families buy in here and stay in here for the long haul, raise their kids, enjoy the rural Goddard. That's what we all moved out here for. I think that's all I have for right now. But I do have a copy of this if you guys like it.
Sure. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm Adam Beck. I live at 1937 North McRae Court, and I'm the HOA president for Spring Hill. My concern is with the overcrowding in the schools, the traffic on Maple, traffic on 183rd. I've noticed in the 12, 13 years that I've lived there that the traffic continues to increase. Along with that, I've noticed an increase of street racing down Maple behind my house. It's a problem, and I would hate to see anybody get hurt from all that. I oppose the dual family. I would like to see a single family. That's all I have. We want, like he said, we want to keep the Goddard School District with high quality students and a nice place to live. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else at this time?
My name's Dana Alexander, and I live at 435 North 179th Street. And for a lot of us, we moved out to an acreage like that so we could have privacy and extra room with no crime. And most of us have paid $500,000, $600,000 and more for our homes. They're kind of like our dream homes. And the reason why we bought out there is because it was R1, and that's what we wanted. That's why we moved there, to single-family dwellings. And if it's allowed to be R2, multifamily dwellings, duplexes, that's gonna mean a lot of rental properties. And I know all about rental properties, and the people that have rental properties do not take care of them. They don't care about the property values, they deteriorate, the yards are full of trash, they a lot of times do not keep their properties in good stead, and we pay a lot of taxes out there, and I think it's kind of a dirty trick to, after you've bought in there and you bought it as R1, to now try to rezone it to get rental properties in there, and that will decrease our property values, and I don't think that that's right. So I'm against changing the zoning to R2.
Anybody else at this time? You can line up and form a queue if you want.
My name is Lucas Jacobson. I live at 1949 North McCrae Court, and I just want to echo what everybody else has been saying, that I am opposed to changing rezoning from R1 to R2. When I purchased the property, I researched it, and the field across was R1. I had no interest in living next to or across the street from duplexes. It will increase crime, increase traffic, increase the burden on their public schools. I don't think it's right that you can just change it after, people they built their houses with the expectation that the area is going to be single family homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
All right. I have a comment from Kathleen Schrader. She wasn't able to make it today. She's at 459 North 179th Circle West. She said, and I quote, rezoning request at Maple Street south of 4th Street and east of 183rd and west of 167th. Received a copy of the rezoning request from my neighbor. I did not receive any notice. No signs are on the property, thus I feel this has not been published properly. We'll discuss that later. I want this zoning request to add that the statement that 179th Street will never be extended so that this property can use 179th access. 179th is a gravel road and cannot be maintained properly without additional traffic. Goddard already has a new addition full of duplexes north of Kellogg and west of 199th, thus I question the need for more two-family units. I would request that the zoning application require no rentals. I am unable to attend the meeting on the 13th, but request that these items be discussed. Thank you. So, Mr. Chair, at this point, if you'd like, you can close citizens' comments.
Close citizen comments.
Very good. So this is item F, Board of Zoning, oh, excuse me. What's going on there? After you jump ahead.
We gotta do E.
All right, there it is. Item E, approval of the minutes. So this is the approval of the Planning Commission regular meeting minutes for May 9th, 2022. And just as a reminder, we had a street naming approval for Dove Estate Second Edition.
I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. So this is item F, Board of Zoning Appeals. This is item F1, the Wells Underwood Development Rezoning Request Case Number Zone 22-3. So a quick background. Fisher Wells submitted a rezoning request on behalf of both himself and Justin Underwood for a proposed development on Maple between 167th Street and 183rd. The rezoning request would change the zoning classification of the proposed land development from R1, single-family residential development, to R2, two-family development. The purpose of the rezoning of the land would be to allow duplex to be built for duplex community development. This would allow the developer to proceed without having to go through a conditional use permit for each lot that he would like to convert to a duplex. If the Planning Commission approves the rezoning, it would then have to go before City Council for a final decision, and if it was approved, it would become official 30 days after publication in the city newspaper. So as most of you are aware, we have to go through a 17-point criteria for review. It's not weighted in any particular fashion. In fact, it's not weighted at all. It's just for consideration. This is from the state state requirement in the case of Arthur Golden versus City of Overland Park. So purple is my answer to the questions, and if you want to ask anything at this point, feel free to stop me in between and we'll go over each individual point. But number one, what are the existing uses and their character and condition on subject property in the surrounding neighborhood? So land use in the east and northeast is farming, ranch land, no improvements. To the southeast is a land use designation of manufactured home park, which is Maple Village. To the south, the land use is single-family detached, Spring Hill, and farming ranch land, which no improvements. To the west, the land use is farming ranch operation with improvements, and to the north is single-family detached, which is X 7th edition. What is the current zoning of the subject property and that of the surrounding neighborhood in relation to the request? Subject property is currently zoned R1, single-family residential. It is in the city limits. The land to the east and northeast is zoned RR, rural residential. That's a county classification. Land to the southeast is zoned MH, manufactured housing. To the south, the land is zoned R1, single-family residential. To the west, the land is zoned RR, rural residential. To the north, the land is zoned RR, rural residential, as their zoning county zoning classifications. Is the length of time that subject property has remained undeveloped vacant as zone a factor into consideration? No, the length of time the land has remained undeveloped was not due to zoning, but more due to the recent development and growth in the Goddard area. I don't think anything in particular has to do with the zoning as prohibiting any type of development on it. Would the request correct an error in the application of these regulations? No. 5, is the request caused by changing or changing conditions in the area of the subject property, and if so, what is the nature and significance of such change or changing conditions? Yes, the city of Goddard is experiencing a large residential increase, as most of you are aware. Most of this increase is single-family detached owner-occupied dwellings. There is a need for rental units along with single-family detached housing. This comes from increased rental demand, which according to the Home Union, which is a real estate analytics site, is comprised of 5 factors: job growth, migration, household formation, elevated home prices, and lifestyle preferences. And as you're probably aware, some of these factors that you're experiencing now, which is leading for that large growth in rental demand. Do adequate sewer disposal and water supply and all other necessary public facilities, including street access, exist? Or can they be provided to serve the use that would be permitted on the subject property? Yes. So just like any other development, there would be petitions for street and sewer and water, just like any other developments that we have. So we would go through the petitions process for the infrastructure and amenity improvements, which is what we outlined here. So would the subject property need to be platted or replatted, or in lieu of dedications made for right-of-way easements and access control or building setback lines? So yes, the land is currently unplatted. They would have to go through the platting process, and that's something that we would require. During the platting process, they'll do a review for stormwater engineering, parking requirements, and everything else, etc. Number 8, would a screening plan be necessary for existing or potential uses of the subject property? No, screening is necessary only for multifamily, which according to our subdivision regulations is 3 units or more, and commercial. These units would be 2-family or single-family. Obviously, it's up to the purview of the Planning Commission if they wanted to approve any type of additional requirements. That's well within their right. Number 9, is suitable vacant land or building available or not available for development that currently has the same zoning as is requested? So I put no. Current zoning for R2 is around 135 acres out of approximately 1,576, which accounts for about 9% of available land for duplex without having to go through a conditional use permit. So I've been speaking to other planning commissioners. They wanted to know kind of total calculations, so I included those calculations on here. Because obviously if you rezone something R2, that doesn't automatically mean they're all duplexes or rental properties. Zoning obviously just dictates certain types of land uses, and then you could go in and put duplexes or single-family detached or anything else depending on the land classification. So R1 is around 90%, R2 is around 9%, R3 is around 1%. If the zoning went through, R1 would be around 81%, R2 would be around 18%, R3 would be around 1%. And so we broke it out further based on function. There's about 42 current duplexes in the city. This is per our 2022 Sedgwick County appraised properties list that was released. And so we have 42 duplexes, which accounts for about 2.29%. Farming/ranch operations with improvements is about 125 parcels, around 6.83%. Federally subsidized apartment complexes is 4 parcels and just less than 0.5%. Garden apartment complexes, 1 to 3 stories, is around 2, just around less than 0.5% as well. Manufactured home park 3, which is less than 0.5%. Single family residence detached 1,654 is 90%. Triplex is 1, so it's about 0.05 of 1%. Grand total is 1,831 parcels, and that's comprised land use functions of those zoning classifications. So if the rezoning did go through, this is what it would look like. And if we added duplexes, and let's assuming it was 100% all duplex, this is what it would look like at 16%, 5.87%, and down. If the request is for business or industrial use, or such use is needed to provide more services or employment opportunities, this is residential, so 10 does not apply. 11 is the subject property suitable for the uses in the current zoning to which it has been restricted. Current zoning is R1 single-family residential, which could remain R1, but it would require every lot that is proposed for duplex to go through a conditional use permit for that lot to be able to build a duplex. Number 12, to what extent will the removal restrictions, i.e. the approval of the zoning request, detrimentally affect the property to the neighborhood? Value is a difficult thing to determine. Conversation with Jack Mannion, Central County Residential Land Analyst, has revealed that urban and rural properties are appraised differently based on the infrastructure that supports these properties. We've kind of gone over this a little bit, but basically you have a lot that's in the county. It's got a water well and a lagoon. It's appraised completely differently than an urban property which has municipal services. So the county is not going to look at a rural property to make determinations of value on an urban property because those properties are under what's called a neighborhood code. So each subdivision that goes in has its own neighborhood code, and they look for comparable properties within that neighborhood code. So, just to kind of reiterate some of that, rural properties tend to decline faster simply due to the fact that rural properties are responsible for their infrastructure. This is according to the county. That supports their homes, lagoons, and water wells versus urban properties that the city support their infrastructure. And so I know one of the questions comes up is that all properties seem to be going up in value, but obviously that rate that they increase, it could be at 3% consistently, and then all of a sudden you see it go up at 2% and then 1.5%. Still going up, but the rate of increase might change depending on if it's rural or urban. Because at some point the county makes a determination that if those lagoons and water wells are not upkept every 30 years or so, they're going to start to take off some of the appraised value of those rural properties. The urban properties do not see that same decline simply because the county assumes that the city is going to maintain the infrastructure that leads to those urban properties, so their property values continue to increase at a steady rate. By this very metric, urban homes with similar square footage of rural homes are valued higher than their rural counterparts due to the improvement of the urban infrastructure versus the rural infrastructure. This, coupled with the fact that every property has a neighborhood code, as discussed, that aligns with the development resides within. Appraisals review similar properties within that neighborhood code for determining comparable property values. So that's, obviously something that comes up a lot. It's something that's in proximity. Just because you're in proximity to something doesn't mean that property is going to be taken into account when it's determining the value of your property. So urban property is going to be within the neighborhood that it was built within. So for example, Spring Hill. Spring Hill, it has one neighborhood code. They don't look to St. Andrews to determine property values for Spring Hill. They look within Spring Hill to determine those type of values. And if they do find a unique property within Spring Hill, they're not going to go out to the county to pull a comparable property. They're going to pull a comparable property within Goddard, within that urban fabric. Number 13, would the request be consistent with the purpose of the zoning district classification, intent, and purpose of these regulations? So yes, this would remain, the use would remain residential. So it's going from R1 to R2. It's not going from R1 to commercial or R1 to industrial. It's R1 to R2, residential to residential. And the city is desirous of allowing more residential development to be built within city limits. This is classified as infill development. We're going to dive into 13 a little bit more, simply because this has come up quite a bit. Would the request be, like I said, consistent with the purpose of the zoning district classification, intent, and purpose of these regulations? So Article 1.101 outlines what the regulations are for and the following purposes, and as you see, they're listed here. I will highlight K, and part of the regulations is to implement the goals, policies, proposals of a comprehensive plan for the zoning jurisdiction. Page 17 to 18 of the comprehensive plan reads, and I quote, maximize the opportunity for each family or individual to rent or purchase safe, sanitary, and decent housing with their economic means. Support innovative planning and utilization of new technology design and new neighborhood units. Plan for diversification of housing to meet the needs of individual user groups. Provide for multiple family dwellings, retirement housing, and other specialized housing as required to meet the needs of defined user groups within the community, and encourage maintenance of older residential structures in good condition, and the replacement of obsolete structures with new units. So this is under the comprehensive plan, pages 17 and 18, and that is part of the purposes that's outlined in the subdivision regulations. 14, is the request in conformance with the comprehensive plan as we just outlined, and does it further enhance the implementation of the plan? Yes, 17 and 18 of the comprehensive plan outlines exactly what we just kind of described. So it is in line with the comprehensive plan. What is the nature and support or opposition to the request? So this is kind of typically what we see. Support comes to the request for more rental properties in Goddard to host those who are either unwilling or unable to purchase a home in the moment. Opposition comes in desire for certain neighborhoods to remain relatively unchanged in their land use composition of single-family detached housing only, or no development of any kind to help continue cultivate small-town rural experience. So those are kind of juxtapose the two, the opposition in favor of and against this type of development. 16, is there any information or other recommendations or requests available from professional persons or persons with related expertise which would be helpful in this evaluation? So we've gone through this many times, so I figured I'd reach out to some of my colleagues across the nation. Since Planning Commission is probably tired of hearing me talk about it, so I reached out to one of my colleagues in Lake County, Florida. Her name is Emily Johnson. She's the chief planner. She said developments in Florida that she's seeing around her neighborhood tend to be single-family detached with a small contingent of multifamily, and then all of a sudden they see senior housing multifamily just jump in with hundreds, if not several hundreds of, not thousands, but several hundreds of units. And so what they have here in Florida is what's called the missing middle, where you will have a lot of low density, then followed by a big spike in high density. And so most of the high density that they're seeing over there is due to senior living. And so that's kind of what they're experiencing. But in Florida, where she's from, particularly, they have a by right. Florida is a very pro-property right state, and so they actually have it based on density, not necessarily land use. And so they will allow developers to build if it meets a certain density threshold, regardless of the land use composition. So it could be single family, duplex, triplex, quadplex. If it meets that density threshold, they will allow it. And so that's kind of interesting for Florida. By comparison, does the relative gain to the public health, safety, or general welfare outweigh the loss in property value to hardship imposed upon the applicant by not approving the request? This development is for residential use and does not pose a serious threat to health, safety, or welfare by its use. It's not like they're asking to put in a tallow factory or an oil factory, something of that nature. There's not going to be releasing particulates in the air. They're not fracking. This is just residential. So. Okay, so just to go into a little bit more of the analysis, so concerns about posting signs and receiving letters. So this has come up before, so I figured I would address it. But state law does not require the posting of signs on lots for notification of zoning changes. This is KSA 12-757. This is also confirmed by the city attorney. Some cities do choose to take that route to increase transparency, but the city subdivision regulations do not mandate it. So Article 10.103, the board may give additional notice to other persons, as it may from time to time provide by its rules. Such rules may include requirements for additional notice to be provided for by the posting of signs on the property to be considered an appeal application. So if Planning Commission felt like they wanted to, you could require additional posting of signs, but it's not a state requirement and it's not required in our subdivision regulations. Some cities have adopted that. There's pros and cons on whether or not it's actually effective or not, but that's not a requirement. State law dictates that notices go out to everyone within 200 feet within the city limits of the adjacent property, or 1,000 feet if outside the city limits. So as mentioned, 459 said they never got a notice. That's because they're 1,900 feet away from the boundary, so they're not going to get a notice. But that's just state law requirements. So we're going to dive into the school district, because that was the question that came up, and we hear it pretty regularly. This is the school district of Goddard, USD 265. This is Goddard. This is Wichita, and the black area is the county, and Garden Plains over here. So the question is, who's impacting the school district? That's kind of a question that comes up. Where does the money flow? Where's the property taxes going? So if you look at this, these are all the properties that are single-family detached, duplex, or triplex within that school district boundary. Of those areas, we have about 1,697, 42 duplexes, 1,654 single-family, 1 triplex, for a total of 1,697 as mentioned. The school property tax that's derived from all those properties is about $2.1 million going to the school district. The city collects about $1.2 million. So as you can see, as a taxing entity, the school district is definitely generating a lot of revenue off the city of Goddard. For the county, it's about 855. There's 1 duplex, 854 single family, no triplexes. School district is generating $1.7 million off those county properties, and the county is collecting $922,000. For Wichita, there's about 7,636 properties that are in that school district. The school district is collecting $12 million from those Wichita properties, and Wichita is collecting $6.9 million in property taxes within the Goddard School District. So in terms of impact, this just kind of outlines some of those numbers. In terms of property taxes, this outlines some of those numbers as well. This is the property in question off of Maple between 167 and 183rd. These are some of the renderings that were sent by the developer. So as you can see, it's a mix of duplexes, single family. Public notice was given incurring small costs. Legally, it was approved as form. It is recommended that the Planning Commission approve the rezoning request for case number zone-22-3. Developers are here and could speak on the matter, or we do have Phil Meyer-Boffman who's representing the developer. So if any of you guys would like to speak at this time, feel free to step up.
I'll step up first, I guess. I'm Justin Underwood, so I'm one of the developers, and I've been doing this for about 30 years. So we're a little different than most developers in the Wichita MSA, I guess I would say, we don't develop to sell. So we're build-to-rent owners. So we come in, we find the land we want, we develop the land, we build our product, and we keep it. Okay. So this is a big project, it's 150 acres. So I want everybody to know it takes a long time to develop 150 acres. Okay. So when you go through these numbers of what percentage are duplexes to residential, it'll take many years to develop 150 acres and build it out. Okay, but what are things change, you know, every day. But we're in the build-to-rent market because we're not affected as much with interest rates and 900-point drop in the stock market and those kind of things, because the rental market is kind of somewhat bulletproof. Okay, as things go up, rents go up, and those kind of things. But what we build is unlike anything you guys have in your market. So we're really building an upper end duplex to get that middle class, upper middle class family in there. So some of those renderings actually have some of the properties that that we build. That brick one, brick top left brick one is, if you can imagine the white hardy board or smart siding more or less placed on that. That's kind of what we got envisioned for out there. We don't, you know, it's on slab, all one level, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, backyards, fenced, landscaped. Everything's managed, everything looks, it's a planned community, okay? So when you drive in there, it all looks the same. It all is mowed the same. It's all taken care of the same. So what I traditionally see in y'all's market is a guy will come in and develop 80 duplex lots, and he'll keep 30 of them and sell 50 of them to other people outside the market. And that may be 10 or 15 different people. They'll build those duplexes and they'll sell them to whoever comes in. And yes, some of them aren't maintained the same as others. Well, that's not what we do. So we go in, develop them, hold them, keep them. If we ever sell them, they're also the one person. Okay, we typically never do sell, but there's more value there. So we want to be part of your system. We want to be good neighbors, and we want to create a good product that adds value. That top left-hand plan right there in this market would be about $525,000 on open market. So you're looking at every building is probably going to have a tax rate around $500,000. Okay, so they're nice. You know, they're 1,700 square foot aside. Every amenity you can imagine having. We're going to put in a pool. We're going to do some things like that. So it's really nice product. We don't build the typical thing that you're seeing around here with all smart siding and the same. Looks like I have 3 duplex plans you build all in Wichita in here. So it is a different product. You know, we're asking that it all be R2 just so we have some flexibility. We are planning on incorporating some single family in there just because we have people that want to be in single family homes and lease single family homes. But you know, typically the R2, you know, works better for us, but it does give us the leniency to go to single family homes. You guys have any questions for me as far as the project goes?
What would your idea be about leaving that tree row as a buffer zone back?
You know, I haven't looked at the tree row. You know, I'll probably leave that more to the engineer. It's really down to cost and how we section this thing out and develop it and what. Is it the tree row that goes through the middle of the side of the property? I wasn't here.
East, west.
Along the creek there, whatever that is.
On the north side.
North
Near the
side.
top of the box.
Okay.
On the property boundary between me and you.
Gotcha.
Citizens' comments are over, please. There's not the agenda we spoke about.
I don't know. I didn't factor that in as a concern. I mean, everything we do, we fence it. So it's another thing I notice in the duplex communities here is they're all left open just so they're easier to mow, I guess. I don't know, but we fence everything. So our subdivisions are fenced. Our yards are fenced, everything's fenced private, so when you go that duplex, you go in your backyard and you feel like you're in the backyard of your house, right? You don't go back there and your neighbor's dog or whatever's over there. So it is a little more it's just a different look, and I've looked around to kind of see if there's something to compare it to, and there really isn't. So there wouldn't be any just wide open venues there. So if that was a back road that ran east and west, and there were buildings stacked there, obviously there'd be a privacy fence to the back of that would block anything that would be seen. So, Fisher.
You said you had you guys maintain and operate these? How?
So we do all the. I'm gonna put Kim on the spot. Some of y'all know Kim. Well, Kim works for me, and I own a large property management company, and we've been in Wichita for probably 3 years with the intention of coming here and starting to develop. So I own property management companies in 4 different states, and so yes, we'll build that. We will manage that, and it'll all be done from Wichita, and we take care of it, and it's a good standard. Obviously, guys, we're in this to make money. Everybody knows that, right? So the nicer they look, the better well they're taken care of, all those things, it just produces better rents for us. So those renderings you saw, our average rent in other places are, this bottom left one here rents for about $1,800. Those up there rent for anywhere from $1,900 to $2,100, and the single family homes are $2,200 to $2,400. So it's not, and the way we qualify people is you have to have 3 times the gross rent to get into the product. Obviously, we're pretty stringent about letting people on the properties we own. So I understand people's concerns. Obviously, we run across this every day when we're doing this for a living. There's just a stigma to duplexes that there's going to be more crime and more, all these things that follow that. And I guess sometimes there are, but we have not found that in our communities. Our communities are going to bring people out of Wichita that you're going to want to live here. It's going to bring professional people that are going to come here, spend their money, hopefully move into a single family home at some point, and but
You said you're talking 1,800 per side.
yes, sir.
You said the
So
properties
the 1250 unit that everybody's building in Wichita, on the northwest side of Wichita is bringing 1,650 to 1,750. Okay, so we're adding 300 to 400 square feet. We are going to drag them out here. Okay, I know what it says drag, but it's 13 or 17 miles out here from the city center. When gas is $6 a gallon, which it's going to be when we start this, right? So it's going to be a little different process, but it's just the appearance and what they're very, very nice. We build a nice product, and we'll work with you guys on design. We'll show you what we're doing, those kind of things, and be really transparent about what we're doing, because we do want, we want to make it, we want it to be successful, and this isn't the first one we've done. We're in the process of building 2 of these right now, so it's we can get the rents. People will pay the rents. I know that sounds like $1,800, but you don't do anything to live there.
What was the square footage range that you guys?
That's about 15 to 1650, just depending on the plan.
Per side?
Per side, yeah. All one levels, all, there's no steps. It's all really set up that anybody could live there, right? So you can live there if you're 25, you can live there if you're 85. So it's all pretty good system, so.
You said the properties were maintained. What does that mean? What's included in that maintenance?
So we do all the lawn care. Nobody does their own lawn care. We do all the lawn care. We take care of all the exterior. I mean, we take care of everything outside the home. We actually take care of the majority of the stuff inside the home. So, you know, if there's a maintenance issue or something inside the home, we take care of that as well. So we do all the exterior maintenance, all the landscaping, all the, anything that needs to be done, we basically do. So it's all done. Of course, the city will provide trash services and things like that. You know, so those typical services will be done. in the
Pool,
city.
playground, sidewalk.
We're putting pools, yeah, pools, sidewalks, all our stuff. You can tell that has sidewalks, so that property has sidewalk on both sides. We'll put we'll propose a pool and some amenities, just depending on how it ends up laying out. But yeah, we envision a pool there for the community. You know, we haven't really talked about it. We've talked specifically about a pool, so we know. I thought we had a picture of a pool, some kind of pool that we're going to put in there. But yeah, be those amenities as well. So all energy efficient, all LED lighting. That project again on the very low bottom there, we just ran that through an Energy Star program, and the lady that was doing Energy Star had been doing it for 18 years. That's the first subdivision she'd ever been to. We got 100 on an Energy Star rating. That's not easy to do. So all LED lighting, all very well insulated. You know, just our party walls are insulated from the ceiling to the roof just for noise. So the number one complaint with duplex is my neighbor's got their TV too loud, right? Well, you can't hear those in our duplexes because we insulate the center wall. So it stops some noise complaints. Any other questions?
Thank you. Commissioner, if you want to speak?
I'm good. I
All
think
right.
covered it.
Bill, you want to speak at all?
Phil Meyer with Baughman Company, and you're discussing land use tonight. If planning commissioners have specific questions about what we do during the planning process or other stuff, or how that process works, I'll be glad to answer that. But for that, if you have questions, let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any discussions?
I would say I do like what I see with, you know, what you're showing us and what I'm hearing, but I do think there's also, as far as duplexes in Goddard, there's gonna be some kind of a threshold that once we reach, you know, amount of, compared duplexes compared to single family rental, you know, what we're trying to do is also, when you bring in all kind of diverse housing conditions for everybody, you know, most people I know, like you guys said, would rather live in a single family home if they're gonna buy it. Rentals, I mean, it may be a different situation.
Well, I'm just gonna, I do this for a living, and you guys can go Google this tonight, feel free to do it. But 36% of single-family home closings in the last year have been for rentals, and that means anything that's 4 units or less, okay? And our nation, our country is swaying to the rental market, okay? Because younger people just don't stay like we used to, right? They don't stay in a home for 10 years. They get a job, they stay somewhere 2 or 3 years, they move. So there's a lot of things driving the rental market. But, you know, with the exception of the last 24 months, most of you guys have no hair like me, so you lived through it, right? Before the last 24 months, there wasn't really a big increase. There wasn't real benefit to owning a home as far as making money, right? Because they didn't grow that fast. So, but if you look and research, the market trend is rentals are getting bigger. There's more rentals everywhere. And what happened is the big guys, the corporate guys, got into single-family residency. So they got out of the multifamily market, which that's what this guy does. So they got out of the big multifamily market and started buying single-family homes and single-home rentals. So the subdivision across the road, I don't know, but I'm going to guess there's 15% or so of those homes that are probably rent houses, you know, that people moved out of and rented them and those kind of things. So, you know, that's just a guess, but that's there again. You guys be aware that we're not, we have no intention of coming in and developing 150 acres. We're trying to buy 150 acres because that's what we got to buy to get it, right? If we could buy 60, we would probably buy 60, right? So it takes a little time to develop that. And those have to be built and done, and then, you know, would be, obviously we're open to basing that or doing something like that if that made you guys feel more comfortable if we start with it, you know, but it'd be easier for us not to do that. But I think once you see what we do and the community sees what we do, it'll be a lot more palatable for everybody. But everybody, you know, we across the table in all of our communities, our vacancy rate is less than 1%. So that's 1,600 units that we have less than 1% vacancy. So, and that's in Kansas, or that's in Arkansas, Missouri, and then we have a few here in Wichita. So there's a big need for it. Rentals, there's a need for rentals, you know, and where the home prices are and interest rates are going, you know, everything's settling down. So.
Mike, on the map, can you remind me where that county-city line?
Sure. So the dashed orange line is the city limits of Goddard, and it cuts down and cuts over here, and then goes up and over and around, and then back over here, and then south on 167.
Any more discussion?
So just because it's not identified on here, I know there's a written description of it, but parcel 1, parcel 2, which one is?
So there's-
Parcel,
yeah, so
parcel
you don't-
1 is to the east and parcel 2 is to the west.
Good question. I didn't
Okay.
put parcels on there because that washes out the whole map.
I mean, it
Maybe-
says east
maybe-
and west, but sometimes that's a little deceiving
I
because
would
the
guess,
verbiage after.
I would guess by acreage, parcel 1 is on the west and parcel 2 is on the east.
Okay.
Whichever one's the larger of the two, because there's a little cutout of this one. They're about equal, but this one's obviously going to be a little bit bigger than this one because this cutout around here for that property. Right
So
there.
parcel 2 being on the east.
Yes.
Is there any consideration to leaving parcel 1 an R1 and just changing parcel 2 to an R2? Was there any discussion in that?
There hasn't been any
direction?
discussion about that. I mean, at this point, the motion would be for
The entire thing.
The entirety, because that's what the application was submitted for.
Okay. Mike?
Did you have a question?
I just hear a
Oh,
squeaking in the
comment.
background.
Yeah.
So this is a question for Justin to answer, but if Planning Commission was going to approve one of the two parcels, it would be best from an engineering development standpoint to start on the west parcel. So the lift station's across the street from the exception, the water is across the street, dragging everything over to the east parcel would be,
And I get that. From the zoning, you've got, so what's on the corner of 167th and Maple, and I know it, I just want to hear it.
This one over here, that's,
Yes,
that's a
right.
mobile park. Yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
So that's what we do, is we buffer things, we work our way up, down. I'm not gonna, no stigma to any of it. But from a zoning, from planner's standpoint, you would kind of step from mobile, really dense, to an R2 that could be opened up to triplexes, duplexes, and I might not be stating that right. And then to an R1, and then to a rural 5-acre lots. That would be
Transition.
kind of a natural way of zoning. I mean, if everything that's been written on it, that's kind of how it works. That's how big cities sort of develop from the inside out. So I just think there should be some consideration to the west being an R1 and the east being an R2. And you haven't, what's adjacent to the west is the 5-acre lot. So the one on the east, and now I'm forgetting parcel 1 and parcel 2, excuse me, but it's backing up to agricultural land, so you really haven't promised, well, there is a promise of zoning, but there's people that are not counting on it like they were, when they bought their 5-acre lot and developed a larger home. So I think there should be some consideration to doing, if we're going to change zoning, and I get that the world is changing and rentals are becoming it. And will it swing back? None of us know. We can't be a predictor of that. We got to assume it's kind of headed in this direction and people are becoming more transient. It just seems right when I look at this, and we're kind of looking at this for the first time, or at least I am. It looks to me like it naturally happens that you would have R2 on the east and R1 on the west. So that's my observation.
Is that even possible at this point with today's meeting?
Not really. I mean, the application was for the whole development. At this point, it would simply be a recommendation to the city council. Whatever the motion is, would be that motion recommendation to the city council. So ultimately, you would just have to decide amongst yourselves what you think is best for that development moving forward, because we're just talking about land use right now with zoning. And then that recommendation goes before city council, and then they consider your recommendation, or they, make their own decision on the matter.
Could that be something we do at the plotting stage?
Yeah, so ultimately, what you're probably familiar with, what we did in December was that the whole thing got rezoned, but there was a restrictive covenant that was put into place to limit the amount of duplexes. During the platting process, you have to delineate which lots are going to be anything other than R1 at that point, anything other than single family, I should say. So on the Trails End development, they marked number two, all the way up different lots that they are designated for duplexes. So the rezoning went through went to city council, where city council decided that they wanted to approve the rezoning based on the restrictive covenant, because they took into account what planning commission said about limiting the amount of duplexes, and then that was taken into account. And of course, the developer also put in an easement for a wall for screening and things of that nature. So ultimately, the consideration is for the rezoning of the whole of both lots. So if planning commission, you have to just make that determination if you are going to deny it or you're going to approve it based on that consideration. So
Basically, you're saying there could be an approval with a recommendation to the city council to limit the number of duplexes,
yes, essentially whatever you felt would be prudent for this development.
even the recommendation to make single family towards the western side,
Yes, whatever you
West
felt.
and north.
western, or whatever you guys will determine. Could have a motion and a recommendation.
Now, I will say from the developer side, and I know you guys do this different in Kansas, if y'all did that, we're gonna start with duplexes. So we gotta develop to that. That's his point, being everything's to the west is there. So if we wanted to start with duplexes, it had to come all the way to the east, all that has to be brought to the east.
Understand
I feel like what we did in December with Trails End was pretty successful. I mean, it gave a little bit on both sides. It allowed there to be a single family buffer around the perimeter of the property. You know, everything on the outside was basically single family, and there was an allowed amount percentage-wise of duplex or R2 properties, like Michael was saying, on the inside, you know, that wasn't abutting existing R1 property. You know, that was, I don't know if that's, if we want to lean towards doing something like that again.
Make the motion.
Yeah,
to cancel.
That was in their request, and they had I'm sorry, I didn't.
Yeah.
That came in their request. Remember, they had those odd percentages, like 40% or
Yes.
something like that.
Yeah.
So this is a little more black and white. There's just R2 or not. You know, just change to an R2 or not. So it's a little. I think they would have to. I mean, we're just giving a recommendation. The city council is. I mean, this is purely recommendation.
Yes, but they still want to hear your feedback. So ultimately, your recommendation goes before city council. They finalize the rezoning request, whatever it is. But if you, either way, like I said, in favor or against, they'll take that into account, and any notes that you might have. So if you're saying that you wanted a single family buffer, that would be taken into account. If you wanted to phase it in terms of the land use development side of it, that would be taken into account as well. Everything that you say, those are all recorded as part of the recommendation by the planning commission to the city council, and then ultimately city council makes that decision how they want to proceed. So
Okay.
That's your motion?
Any more discussion?
I don't take rezoning lightly. I get things are changing, but it's.
Mr. Under, I would ask the question, I mean, do you have a proposed number of single family you think will be here already, or is it just gonna play it by ear?
Yeah, you know, I don't. We, you know, because of the way things are developed in Kansas or Wichita, it's different than, you know, where we develop things. You know, we go borrow the money and develop them the way we want to develop them, right? So it's a little different process with the bonds and how y'all do things. So we're probably a little more pressed on this than usual because of the way the contract on the property went down and our pressure to close on the property and the seller's pressure to make us close. So we haven't had to have a whole lot of discussion because the way that works has worked on this piece of property. So that's the reason that we said, hey, we want to just do it all R2 and do, you know, I would think, from my standpoint, you guys kind of control how much we develop, right? Isn't that kind of the way the process works? Or, I mean, do you guys say, hey, we're going to develop 60 acres of it, or how does that work?
it's a long conversation.
Yeah. Well, I don't really know. So, I mean, if we got 150 acres and the city's willing to develop 40 of it, you know, then there's still 120 acres. It's not
I understand the developers. The point he's coming to is basically what's unique about Sedgwick County and Goddard is specials. And talks with some of my colleagues, they have no idea what specials are. Usually, as mentioned, the developer goes, borrows the money, puts in the improvements, and it just makes the lots more expensive to offset that cost. Specials are unique, obviously, for the surrounding area, including Goddard, because the city borrows the money. We put the improvement in, and it actually benefits the home buyer because we can borrow larger amounts of money at a lower interest rate than the developer can, and it's perceived as less risky. So the bank gives us a better interest rate. So when the consumer comes and buys the house, they're paying less on the lot. And obviously specials usually last about 14 years, where if you finance it all up front, it could be 15 to 30 years. So ultimately specials are better for the consumer, but I understand when developers come from out of state and other areas, they're not familiar with specials. And so that's kind of where things kind of get muddied in terms of what starts and how long the process is and bond attorneys and all that stuff. So That's a long conversation, but I understand. What you're saying.
So typically, we would plat this out and say we want to develop this 40 acres, and we're buying 150, but we're really talking about this 40 because we're not going to develop that whole 150, right? We're going to develop this 40, so that's what's different for me, is I don't really know how that's determined.
So, I mean, he can buy all 150 acres. Obviously, then the rezoning of the 150 acres comes into account. If he develops only 40, he would just plat 40. The specials would go in on the 40 acres, and then if you had, basically just like St. Andrews, you have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, St. Andrews 4th edition, St. Andrews 5th edition, St. Andrews 6th edition, and so on and so forth as the market will bear. And basically that's how it would be done. So, yes, this is for all 150, but obviously since it's unplatted, he couldn't really just buy sections of it, and I don't know, that's a private land negotiation, and I don't know if the seller just was not unwilling to sell one lot versus both, and so I'm not sure. City doesn't usually get involved in private negotiations and land sales.
Mike, in respect to the travel and the additional cars and whatnot, I mean, with Maple being, as I view it here, a combination of county and city, what would, I guess, first question, is there anything on the docket to be talking about that road? 2, what would that look like with city, county interacting in that?
Yeah, so I mean, typically, right now, since it's already in the city limits, we own both sides of Maple, except for this little stretch right here, which KDOT owns that little triangle right here. So we own both sides of the road already. So any improvements that would go in, we would plat, and during the platting process, we would ask for them to donate or give, or basically during the platting process, set aside for right-of-way an additional 50 feet from the center line or 60 feet as needed for future road improvements, for turning lanes or additional travel lanes, etc. I know that Wichita is talking about potentially having their 2027 road extension where they're going to add another lane to Maple. I don't know if that's still going to go through or not. That's their 2027 plan. At some point, as traffic increases, then the roads are considered for re-engineering, and we kind of go from there. Typically, you don't re-engineer a road with presumed traffic flow. You start measuring the traffic, and then you re-engineer the road. You don't assume that it's going to have 1,000 cars per day. You just start to measure, and as you get to a certain threshold, then you add another lane as needed. So.
I guess I would be concerned, I mean, a thought, trust me, you guys would prefer to develop 60 acres of it, but if we have to rezone the whole 150, what's to say that, I'm not saying you do that, but you sell that other portion of the property off, and it's already zoned in R2. It's already been rezoned, so I mean, that would be a concern that I would have if we just did the whole thing,
I mean, he's certainly welcome to take that into consideration.
Yeah, I think we have to assume that it could change hands. I mean, everything here is just kind of, I believe them, but it's just kind of lip service, We have to assume that it's up for anything once it's changed. So
that would just be something, I mean, it could be covered under restrictive covenant. If you felt like that was a concern, was that the restrictive covenant travels with the sale of the land, just like we did with trails, with Goddard Trails, and the restrictive covenant continues. If they were to release the restrictive covenant, that would have to go before City Council and actually release the restrictive covenant. But they couldn't, if Planning Commission felt like that was something they were concerned about and they wanted to consider that, then you would approve it based on, contingent upon a restrictive covenant. That would go before City Council, like, hey, we're concerned about that changing hands. And that would be documented and conveyed to City Council that you're concerned that rezoning all 150 acres at some point, if market trends change and they wanted to liquidate all that land to another property owner, then it has to have a restrictive covenant on it saying you can't develop it any different than what has been proposed already. And that's kind of how it would go forward. Because even if Trails End is sold, the restrictive covenant's still in place. Just like your properties when you sell them, the restrictive covenants of the HOA are still in place no matter who owns the property. So
that would solve the issue. But there's nothing on there right now.
No, and once again, we're only making a recommendation to City Council.
City Council on that. They'll have to do the final approval on that anyway, so.
which they're pretty good.
Yeah.
That
Still a
aspect
pretty
of it.
liberal condition.
Yeah, the city council is usually pretty active on our recommendations for that kind of stuff, so. Any more discussion, or do I have a motion?
Justin?
Looking for something. For or against, need a motion. With or without restrictions. Or recommendations, should I say.
What are we restricted to?
R2? No.
We can't change the zoning and restriction, right?
No, you would.
You can improve the
Either
rezoning with the
approve or
restrictions.
deny.
But we can't I mean, if they sold it, it couldn't revert back to R1. That could.
They would have to then remove the restrictive covenants and rezone it at the same time,
Yeah,
so.
that's what I was thinking.
Which ultimately we'd have to go to city council for both. So you'd be asking for city council to remove the restrictive covenant. And then, of course, the rezoning would also have to come before planning commission anyway, so. If city council did approve the rezoning and it became finalized, if somebody bought the land down the road and wanted to rezone it back to R1 or do a higher density or anything else, they would have to, once again, submit an application, come before planning commission, and it would be like, well, this is, has a restrictive covenant on it, and then, so you could approve it or deny it, and then you would say, we approve it contingent upon the fact that it has a restrictive covenant, and it would go to city council, and they would have to remove the restrictive covenant, and then approve the rezoning as well, so it's just the extra stuff, really.
So you can always make the recommendation to city council that they put some restrictions on it like they did Trails End.
Mr. Parks?
I could see doing this with a recommendation that the west parcel, whichever number it is, remains R1 and the east parcel changes to R2.
It's a portion of,
Do what?
or at least a portion of the west.
Or a portion of the, I don't know, it's kind of trapped between, I don't know what's to the west of the west.
Just field.
I believe there's there's this gentleman here who's got, I think it's 5 acres of on slab house. This is open, and I think there's a horse barn over here.
Oh,
But then there's nothing.
Right.
I'll make a motion that the east side go to R2, the west side go to R1, and both of them have restricted covenants.
Can we do that?
No, at this point, really, it's just gonna have to be a motion for the whole 150 with restrictive.
The whole thing. Okay.
With restrictive covenants as you deem necessary. At this point, because you'd be denying the rezoning request, and then they have to resubmit it with that request, and so that would be a denial, which would then go to city council, and if they follow that, then that would be denial, then they'd have to resubmit the application for the west portion to be rezoned, or the east portion to be R2, leaving the R1 on the west side, so that's just kind of how that would be. If you're in favor of the restrictive covenants, then you would approve the rezoning contingent upon restrictive covenants, limiting the type of land uses that are in that zoning district to a percentage or how you want to see it, buffers or anything of that nature, and then that's your recommendation that would go before City Council, and City Council would have to ultimately take that into account. So at this point, it's R2 for the whole thing.
I'll withdraw my motion then.
So we have to have like a step buffer,
Yeah.
so you can make that recommendation.
We could approve the recommendation to change to an R2 with the, sorry, I'm repeating something, with the recommendation that the west remain R1 and the east parcel changed to R2. I mean, this is just a recommendation to the city council.
Right.
I'm trying, yeah, I'm just
But,
trying to get the
but
word
the whole thing is for the whole thing.
But it all has to be zoned.
We have to approve it.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
That would be the
Yes,
recommendation.
we approve changing to an R2 with the recommendation that the west remain R1 and the east change to an R2, actually change to an R2. Or we deny this, then they resubmit as the west stays in R1 and the east and changes to an R2. So those are really the only, in my mind, those are the
Two
choices.
options.
And that, I mean, it's just about resubmitting this application, which is 2 pages that says parcel, the west parcel remains, or that whatever one is the east parcel that they're asking to change it to an R2.
Right, so that, in that case, that recommendation would be approval of the motion for the rezoning to an R2, but ideally, you want the motion, when it goes to City Council could take into account that, and they'll say, we approve it or deny it, and we're gonna deny it, assuming it's gonna come back through the system, to just have the right side, or basically the east side be R2, with the left side, or the west side being R1. Because ultimately, it still has to go to City Council a week from today for final consideration. So whatever consideration you have, whatever recommendations you make will be considered by City Council, but then ultimately they'll make a decision one way or another.
Yeah, right.
So if they take into account what you're proposing, then it would be denied, and then they would have to resubmit the application to come back through for, leaving one portion R1 and another portion R2.
I can't make a recommendation, so could they make it for a perimeter buffer of single residential?
Yeah, I mean, that would just be in the restrictive covenant.
You're not saying east-west, there just has to be a perimeter buffer.
Yeah, so we could approve the R2.
That would be more like what we did at Trails End, where it's the perimeter is the R1,
You're just talking on the north side,
single
right?
family.
No, you're talking,
He's talking more towards the west and then across the north.
You got a little street
Correct.
here, but you have no street. It fits all the way around anyway.
We need a new motion.
I'll move that we rezone to R2 as requested.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
aye.
Motion fails, so. Thank you very much. The final consideration will go before City Council a week from today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time. Item F2, this is the RD Wood rezoning request, case number zone-22-2. So, quick background, Bo Hudson of Landmark Commercial Real Estate, LCR, has submitted an application on behalf of Mr. RD Wood to rezone 4 acres of city-owned land from C2 General Commercial District to R4 High Density Residential. The city has been voting with LCR, has been working with LCR since June of last year, reviewing all the possible options for developing the 4 acres of city-owned land located directly north of Orchland Farm and Home Store. The original conversation started with the property remaining commercial for a commercial development. However, after some review, it was determined that the location made it difficult for that property to be marketed for the general public due to being screened from US 54 by Orchland. This led to conversations of rezoning to a mixed-use or higher density development, and ultimately the decision was made to look at possible rezoning to higher density residential leaning towards row homes or quadplexes. So, quick analysis. Once again, you've probably seen this before, obviously because we just went through it. But once again, number one, what are the existing uses and their character and condition on subject property and the surrounding neighborhood? Land use to the east is a fire station, land use classification fire and rescue. Land use to the south is commercial, land use classification discount store. Southwest is commercial, land use classification convenience store. To the west is a residential single-family detached dwelling. And to the north is platted for single-family detached currently under construction, which is Rustic Creek. What is the current zoning of the subject property and that of the surrounding neighborhood in relation to the request? The land in question is Zone C2, General Business District. The land to the south is Zone C2, General Business District. The southeast is Zone C2, General Business District. To the southwest is Zone C2, General Business District. To the west is Zone R1, Single Family Detached. And to the north is Zone R1, Single Family Detached. Is the length of time that subject properties remain undeveloped vacant a zone factor in the consideration? It could be considered a factor. The original property owner gifted it to the city without any restrictions on it, so it is possible that the zoning type is difficult to lease given its location behind other commercial properties. Number 4, would the request correct an error in the application of these regulations? No. Is the request caused by change or changing conditions in the area of the subject property? And if so, what is the nature and significance of such change or changing conditions? So yes, City of Goddard is experiencing large residential increases. Most of the increases single-family detached owner-occupied dwellings. We just kind of went over this a little bit. There is a need for rental units along with single-family detached housing. This comes from increased rental demand, which, according to Home Union, once again, real estate analytics site, is comprised of 5 factors: job growth, migration, household formation, elevated home prices, and lifestyle preference. Do adequate sewer disposal and water supply and all other necessary public facilities, including street access, exist, or can they be provided to serve the use that would be permitted on the subject property? Yes, roads, sewer, water all exist, and service lines can be extended up North Main Street to reach the property. 7, would the subject property need to be platted or replatted, or include dedications made for right-of-way, easements, and access control of building setback lines? So no, this line is actually platted already. North Main Street runs right up to it, and it's just right to the east of it, and I'll show you that on a map in a little bit. Would a screening plan be necessary for existing or potential uses of the subject property? So yes, in this case, the wood screening is necessary for multifamily, which is 3 units or more. Since they're proposing row homes or duplexes in that composition, it's 3 or more units, so they would need to screen this potential one. Is suitable vacant land or buildings available or not available for development that currently has the same zoning as is requested? No, R4 is a new zoning classification, and no other piece of land in the city currently have the zoning classification. It's been kind of a floating classification. We've never applied it before, so R4 is brand new. R3 is the next closest high-density residential. All lots of an R3 zoning classification are developed. If the request is for business or industrial uses, are such uses needed to provide more services or employment opportunities? This is residential, so 10 does not apply. Is the subject property suitable for the uses in the current zoning to which it has been restricted? No, C2 allows for apartments and condos and residential units above commercial mixed use, but no multifamily row homes or quadplexes. So commercial, you could build a commercial, which is called mixed use. You put it on the first floor and residential goes on top. And we've changed it recently where Planning Commission and City Council both agreed that you could have condos and apartments in a commercial district. And actually, it turns out Derby has done something similar. We'll go into that in a little bit as well. But you couldn't really just have at-grade row homes or quadplexes. And so in this particular case, they do have to rezone it. To what extent would the removal of restrictions, i.e. the approval of the zoning request, detrimentally affect other properties in the neighborhood? This type of request generates a lot of questions about value. In this particular case, the abutting properties are commercial predominantly. I mean, surrounded by commercial on almost all sides, except basically the north and one lot across the North Main Street. There's one house there, but other than that, there's basically a quick shop, and then you have Sonic right pretty close by, Orchland to the south, and then the fire station. So it's mostly commercial surrounding. This proposal is for 4 units or more, which is treated, so however, this does not seem to be the case since his proposal for 4 units or more, which is treated as a commercial land use assessed by the residential weight of 11.5. So I got on the phone again, once again with the county and said, well, how are you guys going to appraise this? It's a zoning commercial, but typically NADCD treats 3 units or more as commercial. And so they said they would assess it at 11.5, which is the residential rate, but it's treated like a commercial building. So that nuance of how that plays out in the appraisal process would be somewhat interesting. Obviously, the city doesn't do appraisals, it's just all county related, so we'll see how that turns out. Other examples I've seen single-family detached housing and budding multifamily showing no decrease in value due to the high demand in the area for both owner and renter type structures. Would the request be consistent with the purpose of zoning district classification and intent and purpose of these regulations? So R4 residential high density district. This district is designed for the placement of houses and mixed use developments to be designed in terms of maximizing the pedestrian experience and creating a high level density. Design creativity is encouraged to generate more value and increase housing stock variability. This use falls under the zoning district design guide. And so once again, 13, since it comes up quite a bit, is just outlined here again. Page 17 and 18 of the comprehensive plan, which is asked about in item K, which is under Article 1.101. Maximize opportunity for each family or individual rent or purchase safe, sanitary, and decent housing within the economic means. Support innovative planning and utilization of new technology, design of new neighborhood units. Plan for diversification of housing to meet the needs of individual user groups. Provide for multiple family dwellings, retirement housing, and other specialized housing as required to meet the needs of defined user groups within the community, and encourage maintenance of older residential structures in good condition, etc. Is the request in conformance to the comprehensive plan? And yes, it does. It matches page 17 of the comprehensive plan, which outlines providing for multiple family dwellings, which, as mentioned, defined as 3 units or greater. Retirement housing and other specialized housing is required to meet the needs of defined user groups within the community. What is the nature of the support or opposition to the request? So there has been no notice of opposition to this request, ironically. Support comes in the form of more residential housing variety, so no one's actually mentioned this project at all, except for one developer to the north who asked about potentially rezoning some of his property himself. But other than that, no one's mentioned this rezoning request. Is there any information or are there any recommendations on this request available from professional persons or persons with related expertise which would be helpful in its evaluation? So once again, since you guys are probably tired of hearing from me, I reached out to other colleagues around the nation. This particular instance, I reached out to Everett Haynes. He's assistant city planner in Derby. They actually allowed residential developments in all commercial districts. So that's unique because Derby actually did the same thing we did. They said, well, if you have a commercial district, you can put residential on it. But they went a step further where they said you can actually build a single family detached house right on a commercial parking lot, which is kind of interesting. I don't know how that would actually play out. And obviously that's in theory. I don't know if anybody would want to build a residential detached house on a commercial parking lot. So theoretically, but you could do it in Derby. You can't do it in Goddard. Obviously, we've restricted the commercial zoning to be predominantly commercial, mixed use apartments and condos. Derby took it a step further. They also said that they've seen a lot of quadplexes becoming very popular in Derby, and it's better received than larger style apartments. They have gained momentum due to higher use among seniors. So I guess there's been a high proclivity for seniors to move into quadplexes versus the traditional apartments for senior living. I'm not really sure why. I can't speak on that definitively. They said that typically you'll see quadplexes obviously having shared walls. They'll have a floor and then they'll have a basement. So instead of it being 2 stories, it's 1 story with the basement, obviously shared walls, 4 units. And I guess the guests of the seniors would come over and visit and be in the basement room, and the senior would stay on the first floor. I guess that's kind of what they're seeing over there in Derby. So by comparison, there's a relative gain to the public health, safety, or general welfare outweigh the loss, property value, or the hardship imposed upon the applicant by not approving the request. Development is for residential use and does not pose serious threat to health, safety, or welfare by its use. So here's the 4 acres. It was donated to the city. No restrictions, which is obviously beneficial. Rusty Creek is to the north over here. This is Orshlands. This is the quick shop. Sonic is over here. This is the fire station. This is that single family detached residence. They did receive a letter. There's no comment. Hopper and Autumn over here.
And no comments from Rustic Creek.
The only comments we got was from the developer asking for potential rezoning on their property as well. So,
is there anybody even living in Rustic Creek yet? No.
No, all of Rustic Creek is owned by the developer. So the letters that went out was received by one individual and said he saw opportunity. So
they're going to buy their lot and their house knowing that there's going to be quadplexes there.
Right, and so that's obviously, if this turns into quadplexes or row homes or anything exceeding 3 units, they're going to have to screen the north side here.
Are we talking something similar to what Medical Lodges has done as far as types of homes?
No, this is going to be unique because Medical Lodge is I I have to go back and look, but I think it's duplexes at Medical Lodge. They're
They're
2 units,
duplex.
yeah. So it's 2 units, and quadplexes are 4 units with, basically you have several shared walls. A duplex has got 1 shared wall, a quadplex is 4 units, 1, 2, 3, 4, basically next to each other, so. But the R4 opens up sort of for that versatility of design, which allows for them to do quadplexes or apartments or condos as necessary. It's the highest density zoning classification we have.
Now, does that do away with the setbacks and
Yeah, so R4 is basically has almost 0 setbacks. We, obviously, Planning Commission approved some setback requirements, so it's not 0 lot line. There are some setbacks, they've just been reduced to just a certain amount, basically. I have to go back and look exactly.
Kind of minimized.
Right, they've been reduced, basically. So it's not 0 lot line, like they can't go right up to the property line here, but there has to be a minimum setback requirement on that.
So,
but in between them, there's no,
That setback, so if a quadplex went in, there'd have to be a little bit of a setback between them and the additional quadplex, but only if it was platted that way, where the lots, if they wanted to replat and split them into separate individual lots, then setbacks would kick in. If they're not platted that way and they're all on the same lot, then technically, no, they wouldn't have to have a setback between one quadplex and another, but then at that point it'd be row homes, because you'd be, basically be running 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, greater than 4, so.
okay.
I see that.
But it could,
Go ahead, Justin. Go ahead.
but it could be like one large apartment complex?
Yeah, it could, yeah,
I mean,
R4, it could,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
R4 allows for the greatest flexibility in density.
So we got
You
to
could-
kind of assume, again, like worst case, not worst case scenario, it's not a negative thing, but there's one big apartment building on that.
They could,
property
yeah, absolutely.
With parking around.
Yes,
it.
of course, they have to count.
That would be the most dense.
Yeah,
That would be
but also-
possible.
Yeah, and what's interesting, and as mentioned in Florida, they do it based on density. We do it based on land use here, so it's a little bit different. We really have no density restrictions other than we have a lot coverage, so a
Yeah.
percentage of lot coverage. R3 actually had what I saw was the only density requirement, which was a minimum square footage per unit. R4 has no minimum square footage requirement per unit, so you can go big, and but
As
it does
big
have a
as
cap.
the roof area allows.
Yes, that's right, and there's no lot coverage minimum on R4, or maximum on R4, so you can go almost
Fill it
complete.
in.
Right. I think
Except for parking requirements, of course, because
Yeah,
you have to count for off-street.
I mean, I think we had a 6-foot setback. Does that sound right?
I'd have to go back and look at that, I'm sorry, I should have pulled it up.
Or something? It wasn't much.
No, it's very reduced, yeah. But of course, once again, they have to do account for parking. so.
6 foot off, even off of Main Street?
I don't know. It just seems like maybe either side.
Okay.
It seems like it was something really low like that.
It's very reduced. Typically, though, they're not usually going to put it up next to a major corridor that greatly. But then again,
I know.
it just depends on how it's designed.
Looking at that retainage pond just north of the property, is this property going to require its own drainage plan as well?
So yeah, so since it's greater than an acre, it's going to have its own
That's going to
stormwater
reduce
engineer.
the amount of square footage that can be developed on it.
Right, I mean, I don't know if the engineers are going to require a retention pond or not, but typically if you have 1 acre or more, you have to account for retention.
And how many acres is this?
4 acres.
Unless that detention was designed for a larger.
Yeah, but that was designed for this subdivision, so, I mean, it is designed to be larger, but it's mostly designed to be larger to capture Hopper and Autumn Blaze, because I guess Hopper and Autumn Blaze was designed at some point as to expand over here, but it never happened. So a lot of the stormwater from Hopper and Autumn Blaze dump onto this open lot. So the developer and the city partnered to help oversize those retention ponds that capture the stormwater from Hopper and Autumn Blaze. But this, if they were going to dump onto here, they'd have to have what's called a cross-lot drainage agreement. So they'd have to go and say to the developer, can we dump water into your retention pond? That would actually have to be an agreement. If not, then they would have to account for drainage on their lot, on their site.
Not really much discussion here.
No.
Right along the corridor.
Excuse me?
So it's right along the Kellogg corridor, right?
Yeah.
Public notice was given incurring a small cost, approved as to form. It is recommended the Planning Commission approve the rezoning request for case number zone-22-2. Bo Hudson of Landmark Commercial Real Estate is here. If you have any questions for him, he represents the developer.
Hi guys, Bill Hudson, Landmark Commercial. Happy to answer any questions I can.
have any questions.
I see some designs, but I know that's
You don't
not
have,
really.
yeah, is there,
Yes.
is there a plan for?
I have some rough plans that
Okay.
I provided, and you guys are welcome to flip through. I mean, this was just since site plans and further plans aren't required yet. We still went ahead and just did one to give everybody an idea of what it would look like and kind of how it would lay out. I mean, it's basically, that's 20 units,
I get
so
the idea.
yeah,
Yeah.
that'll give you the idea. But it has elevations. They're 1,350 square feet. But that'll give you an idea how they lay out. There's some being built like close to Wichita State University. There's been quite a few in Derby, and like Micah said, it's been popular with anyone from a college student to a retiree. And we like it for this site. I mean, just because it's kind of an infill site, there's not a ton of things you could do with it. Because it doesn't have visibility necessarily from Kellogg, but it's transitioning back to housing. It's just that next layer. I mean, if it wasn't this, it would probably be something industrial, potentially. And we know there's more and more people coming out here that want more and more of an option when it comes to housing. So.
Sorry,
Slab or basement?
Slab, yeah. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, kind of a laundry room, mud room, and then separation walls that give them kind of a back patio, backyard.
I don't have any questions. Good looking concept.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll make a motion, we approve the rezoning request for the lot with the parcel number 554-391.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. Motion passes. Know if you want to stay for the rest of the night or have a good evening.
Okay, thank you guys.
Old business, there is none. New business, there is none. Staff report, there is none. If you'll take it up enough of your guys' time. So at this point, it will be item J, planning commissioner comments.
No comments.
No comment.
I know.
Somebody write that down.
No comment.
Oh, man.
Anybody else?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I don't.
I would say, I do appreciate that they brought some more diversified type housing. That we can make something like that, or at least moving it along to growing the city to be able to house more people in different situations and whatnot. I think it's got to be in the right area, to be able to do it. And I like what they were showing us, a lot of more patio type communities where people could come of any age and live in there. I like seeing that. I just wasn't feeling comfortable making the whole thing.
Yeah.
You can't go back. I mean, once you've done it, you
You can't take it back.
can't go back. I mean, you can, but nobody's going to pay to go back. They're spending money to go in
That's
that
where
direction.
the recommendations to restrict it would have come in.
Yeah.
play. But
I think
it
at
is a
some
big,
point, we gotta
big
figure out
parcel.
what the threshold really is, too, for, types of housing. How many single families compared to,
Even if all that would have got developed in duplexes, that still would have been 18%.
yeah, it would have been pretty minimal.
Yeah, about 18%, yep.
And with the single family housing, you're talking, that's existing built, not to mention all the lots that are still yet to be built, is that correct?
Yeah, so that doesn't include all the lots that are yet to be
So
built.
you still have
It's
all of Rusty Creek, a lot of Arbor Creek,
Right.
Trails End.
Right, I was just pulling the land use function percentage that you saw. So what you see is typically when you're aggregating zoning, it's a lot of it, you're not going to develop on it because if it's R1, well, there's a school there, you're not going to demolish the school. So sometimes the numbers can kind of get skewed. You're trying to look at what is able to be developed versus not able to be developed, but you're not going to develop on a retention pond, you know, so a lot of the zoning has large acres that are just, you can't develop on at all, and that's under R1. And obviously under R2, something like in Cloverleaf, even though all of Cloverleaf is R2 on one side and commercial on the other side, 100 and, I think it's 118 lots are single family. So even though it's R2, they're still putting in single family there, and then they have about 32 lots, I think, so I guess that would be 12. So basically they have 112 that are single family and about 18 that are, well, 32, but that are duplexes. And so when something gets rezoned, I mean, the assumption is that you're going to go the highest density, so that's a correct assumption.
Yes.
There's no reason to rezone if you're not going to go to the highest possible density, because that's the whole reason for the rezoning, is to maximize value off that land. Rezoning restricts certain types of value and certain types of land uses based on that very assumption. And so the assumption is as soon as you rezone it, you're gonna fill it up as fast as possible, basically. But I mean, at the same time, that's kind of what you see. It's hard to say because markets just do this, and
Right.
nobody can say definitively how it could turn out. I mean, you could have all of them be all duplexes, none of them be duplexes, or most of them be duplexes, or 50-50 split. The only thing that really makes it somewhat more definitive is we don't have a protective overlay. Wichita's got a protective overlay, and we don't, so it's something to be considered.
And the only way to stop this pitchfork stuff from happening every time we go to build up or rezone up against rural residential would be to have in rural residential that anything you zone around it has to have a buffer of something.
Yeah,
In theory.
yeah, I mean, that's something to be
A
considered.
buffer of 100 feet, I don't, whatever, a lot depth or something like that, so that like,
Mhm.
you end up with that R1 buffer around it. No matter what you change it to, you're always going to end up with some kind of
Right.
buffer around those.
That's where it gets difficult because, like I said, the city doesn't get involved in land sales.
I
So
know.
I mean, if the property owner is saying I want to sell 150 and not a penny less, then the city's not going to say, well, can you just sell them 40? The city doesn't dictate those type of things, and so
And it's not strictly rural residential too. There's been duplexes proposed in the city
yes.
that,
Yeah.
But I like that idea.
There's always-
But
there's always that
it's the people that buy these huge lots and build these big homes on them, and then we turn around and we always look like the bad guys when we didn't zone it. We look. and
Right, but-
Somebody right next to them wants to change it to something less restrictive.
that
And
80
denser.
acres at northeast corner, is that still for sale? 167th and Maple?
Mm-hmm.
167 Maple on
Yeah.
the.
No, it's
Or did it
I
sell?
think it's
I
sold.
think it's so.
it's old.
Sold.
So there's nothing
could do
from
whatever they
anybody
want.
stopping
That's
in
in
Wichita
county.
and
That's what I'm
dropping
saying.
R2 and filling that full of duplexes
Yeah.
right by it.
You're talking about this over here?
Or
Yes.
going around the
Yeah.
other side of,
That was annexed by
Central.
Wichita.
across the street.
That was-
That one right there.
This one was annexed by Wichita in December of last year.
Right,
Well,
that's what I'm saying, they could
there-
drop,
There's one up at,
Two places
there's
right there.
there's one at Central and 167th that just sold. Is that a guess when you, was what you were talking about?
no, I was talking there in
Oh.
Maple, I didn't know this.
But there's one north of that, yeah.
Seems like I've seen set for sale signs on the fields. It's on the west side of 167
Mhm.
as
Yeah,
well.
there
So
Right, right. So
that's
this
not
is,
in our.
this is laying real estate over here, and there's conversation about developing this. But this has actually been annexed by Wichita just December of last year, so that they've grown pretty extensively, and you can kind of see it now here too. The yellow being Wichita, this is now their official city limits, just touching on 67 right there. So.
There's always that stigma with duplexes that everybody has, and at those kind of rates, you're not gonna be getting,
Yes, but we can't assume that that's true.
Yeah.
They're telling us that. But see, that's where I get, because I have to weed out all that crap.
the current ones they just built.
No. Well, no. What they're sitting here telling us is it doesn't mean anything. Like we're going to build these, and we got these pictures of these big beautiful. It doesn't matter. we could change it, we change it to an R2 and they could walk out here and they could go to Baughman and design this super dense, all duplexes neighborhood.
1,200
Unless
square
we put a
feet.
restriction on it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so if we put the restriction on it, then we still gotta approve the plot plan. This is just rezoning, is all it was.
Exactly.
So we could stop the super dense and the plot plan part.
Yeah, you're
Right.
right. You're right.
I do like the idea of a buffer around anything that's
And
R2.
that, I think we wouldn't get these people coming in here. They wouldn't care anymore if there was a 200-foot buffer or something like that from their property line around rural residential. Because I know what they're thinking. They don't want any progress out here. They don't want anybody moving out here.
Could you mitigate that some with a screening requirement as well? I mean, if it's X number of feet without screening and it's lessened by whatever if you screen it with something, I mean, it would be the same concept. I mean, they just don't want to see it. Anyway. I mean,
Planning Commission has pretty wide latitude to make any recommendation. I mean, granted, I guess it's a recommendation, but you have pretty wide latitude to make an approval contingent upon extra screening, an approval contingent upon a buffer, an approval contingent upon restrictive covenants. You have that latitude. Ultimately, though, like it's been talked about, that those considerations have to go to City Council and they have to finalize them. They could throw out all the recommendations. They could approve all of your recommendations. They have wide latitude in City Council to make.
They can approve the whole thing without us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they will, right. They're going to do it. They already proved that. They're going to do it.
But say in this case, we could have, at the plotting stage, required a 8-foot concrete wall
Yes.
on the south side of the current tree row.
Yes.
But if you had a buffer, it'd be more consistent. Our recommendations are going to waver. I mean, they're going to change depending on
That's
if
why
we
I
had a
wondered
good
if
day
we-
or a bad day.
That's why I wondered if we had if the buffer was
Yeah,
with or without screening would determine the set.
Sure.
But
And
yeah,
then there's
Because then you're not giving
something,
up so much.
something more solid and straightforward
I
than
need something in black and white.
right than us just well, put in a wall, put in some tree,
if I lived on 167th Court, I wouldn't want the trees to go either.
Yeah.
I would be the first one to tell you that.
So you put in a restriction that they couldn't clear that hedgerow,
Right.
but I mean,
Then you'd have, to me, you'd
Tree.
have the secondary of an 8-foot tall concrete wall or whatever, so if the trees ever died, whatever,
okay,
they're still.
okay. So if
screened.
you're
Still a
playing,
buffer.
yeah, so
Still
Well,
then you would have to replace the
Right.
screen, the
same
Okay.
thing with Genesis.
I mean, could you legally take out the tree row, considering it's probably right on the line and half
Oh,
the residents wants
we
to
call that,
accept
that becomes a
that
civil
landowner.
matter.
I know.
No, they could go in there.
But then you're asking people to spend money. You're
Well, I think
saying at some point in time you're going to have to spend some money on this.
there was a
Whereas,
gentleman that was gonna spend money, that was probably it.
oh, I know, I know, and I know they turn out a good product and all that. I'm always thinking the worst case scenario.
Yeah,
They turn around and they sell it and they walk away, and then we're left with somebody out of.
when I moved to
New
Guthrie,
York
I lived in
and
those
we-
duplexes over there in Hopper for a year and a half, before I found the house I wanted and bought.
Yeah.
You know, am I bad because I lived in a duplex or a criminal? No. I just needed a place to live in Goddard until I found the place I
Oh,
wanted.
I mean, I've lived in a mall,
But that's the stigma that goes with it.
That's right.
Unfortunately.
And the thing is, people move out to Goddard. I mean, they would, not being negative, but they would have, stayed in Wichita. You move out to Goddard to kind of get away from the density. In theory.
That and the Goddard schools is always a huge draw for people.
Well, then their point is valid about the Goddard schools being overwhelmed.
We don't control the school district. I know they've already got it in plans for another whole set of schools whenever that happens. They're already planning for it. It's just, we can't do everything based on waiting on the schools because they're not going to put the cart before the horse.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
They're not gonna do that with the roads either.
Right.
That's right.
You got to
Yeah.
have the land use ready to go and people want it before they're going to change the roads.
Yeah, I still like having a buffer for the rural residential.
You can go to any of these West Wichita, single-family home communities, and you're hard pressed to find a for sale sign anywhere.
Yeah,
I mean,
we've always had.
So they fill up too, just as much probably as duplexes.
All three of the newer neighborhoods, I guess before the brand new ones went in, there's rentals in all those. There's rentals in my neighborhood. Nothing stops you. You can build a single family house and you can still have rentals throughout the whole thing. That could all be R1 and everything in there could be a rental.
That's true.
Yep.
I know there's rentals in your neighborhood too.
I know there's one, two houses for me, rents for $1,700 a month.
That's what I'm saying.
Does-
Rents now are just what people are paying.
Do the
It's more than my house
the
payment.
homeowners associations, can they restrict
No,
people from renting in there?
it's state law. You cannot.
Oh, really?
You
Okay.
cannot do it.
Okay.
You cannot restrict somebody from renting their house. Now, with the HOAs, they make sure it's maintained,
Yeah.
and that there's a covenants for even these planned developments like that, even though there would be R2 or whatever, you're still gotta maintain it per the covenants. I mean, they'll slap a lien on your house. Make no joke about it. Okay. Are we done with commissioner comments?
Item K, this is adjournment, so next regular planning commission meeting will be July 11th, 2022.
I make a motion.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Thank you very much.
Your meetings are too long.
Yeah, really.
Are we offline, Thatcher?